imagine a world where textile is more valuable than gold, where scraps of fabric are precious and saved. That world existed not too long ago. Today, we read in the newspapers endless stories of 39,000 tons of fabric and textiles ending up in the desert in Chile. We know that one truck of textile waste and garments is dumped, burned every second. It's one of these things in fashion that I struggle with the most. It's the thing that in my company, I always wonder, how should we deal with this? Now, my love affair for fashion started a long time ago. When I was 12 in school, we had a whole class on how to by hand stitch a doll and then put the face on it and make the hair. I loved it. I was one of the kids that was finished the earliest. And so one of the moms that was there to help came to me and she explained to me that I had to take some measurements and then convert these measurements into drawings and then cut some scraps, and altogether that would give me a dress. Now I was fascinated and I got to work. I measured the length of the arm of the doll and the length of the doll, and I did the math and I got something which looked like this. I stitched it together and I was mesmerized. I had a complete fascination for what happened in front of me. I took something two-dimensional and with some measuring, it turned into a three-dimensional garment. Now, I immediately got very, very excited because I saw my future. I saw the potential. If this works for a doll, it should work for me. So I got to work. This is what the dress looks like. I measured myself. I went to my mother and I said, I need fabric. So she thought it was one of these whimsical things where a 12-year-old has a new hobby for a week or so. So she took me to the cheap fabric shop where they sell curtains and table runners, and I bought the most beautiful green and white checkered fabric, and I cut myself a dress, and I wore it with pride. I didn't realize then and there that I might have used a technique, an ancient technique, that would solve one of my later in life problems, and that would come back as a very afterthought in my work. Now, of course, what we did was very simple, but also with a lot of history. At that time, I had no understanding of that. So many years later, I started a company. I have been fascinated about fashion, about sustainability, and about how we can make clothes for a long time. And in my company, we look at how we can do the best we can in making sustainable clothes. That means we look at organic cotton, and we look at how things are dyed and who is making them and where. We look to the distance our garments travel, the amount of salaries people get paid that are stitching our clothes. We look at all of that. And we know that the system that happens today on a global scale of how we make textile and fashion is broken, but we're looking constantly for solutions, for ways to do it better. So within my company, we have been looking at all of these things, but there was one thing that almost from the beginning, I didn't know how to quite solve. Every time I designed a garment, that would immediately lead to cutting waste. And so already from the beginning, I started saving it. It started with one bag, black little scraps of fabric that I was accumulating in my office. But soon I realized there was more of that. So I started calling our manufacturers and the people we worked with in Germany and in Portugal and in India, if they can please keep our very precious pieces of textile, because I have beautiful, sustainable, organic material I didn't want to waste. I didn't want it to end up on the cutting floor. Because today, industry standard is that 15% of fabric ends up on the cutting floor. That means that a precious fabric that has been lovingly grown by a farmer, the cotton crop that has matured, has been picked and processed and transported all over, that has been dyed and woven into beautiful fabrics, gets chopped up, and 15% of that precious material never becomes a garment. It just ends its life there. And for me, that was unacceptable. It was really so painful. And so I kept collecting it. I had bags and bags coming back to my office. My team thinks I'm kind of a hoarder and they laugh about my endeavors. But for me, this was really something crucial to who we were and what we were doing. You cannot talk about sustainability and not think about the end of life and about all the trouble you're creating and the mess you make with every step. So I looked into it further, and at a certain moment, this is what my office started looking like. We have piles of scrap fabric. We sort them per color. But yeah, in the beginning, I had a dream that very soon there would be recycling solutions available that we could access into. But I really soon realized that that recycling dream for the near future will be just that, a dream. So I had to look further. So we started making things and organizing workshops where children would come to our office and we would teach them how to make dolls and games. But we are a garment design brand. We make clothes. So our scraps accumulate fast. And giving workshops was simply not sufficient enough to deal with our waste. So we looked further at patchwork. Now, patchworking was fantastic because we could cut and color coordinate from all our different bags, and we could immediately create the shapes we needed, so we didn't have to cut them out later. Now, that comes with a huge complexity. That is that scraps have random shapes. And so to do production, to ask a factory or a tailor to make many of this is very complex, because what they strive to do is exactly replicate what we have done. So this is not something that at scale would work. When we made these dresses, we realized we had to do each and every one in our office ourselves. Again, I have too much scraps to do that. Now, the reason I think it's so valuable is that we kind of forgot today how textile is made. There is such a distance between the farmer and the weaver and myself that we lost an understanding of the craft and the love and the time and energy it takes to make fabric and to make clothes. And this is why we don't really value it as highly anymore. But if you really understand how it is done, you want to look closely, you want to cherish it. Now, historically, all patterns that we had, all methods we had to make clothing was zero waste. Zero waste pattern making was the industry standard. But this was before the industrial era. This was, if you look at India, all the draping that was happening. Fabric was simply so valuable, you would not think about wasting it. You would not even think about cutting it. You would simply drape it. If you were in Scotland, you would have your tartans and you would pleat away and then belt it around you and you would have your Scottish kilt. Kimonos were a matter of matching the right fabrics and creating intricate patterns and then draping it and stitching it all together to make your outfit. The fact that we chop it up now and throw away 15% is because we have devalued the whole fabric and the whole process. But it used to be, and I don't know if you noticed, it used to be that if you would have a few yards of silk, you'd exchange it for a horse or even for food supply for a whole year for a family. If you would have Dhaka cotton, few meters again, you could exchange it for gold or for a horse and carriage. It was precious. This is why in the techniques we employ to make clothes, it would never be wasted. And this is where the solution came from what I practiced more than 30 years ago, the zero waste dresses and the zero waste patterns. Finding ways of taking a two-dimensional puzzle that reassembles into a three-dimensional garment. It is about the methods that we employ to cut little things and reassemble them. Now, I early on in my career realized this would only work if my team is as excited as I am, where I really motivate them to think outside the box, that we find ways to make these garments fashionable, contemporary, and interesting, and that it's a challenge that we can conquer. It should never be a limitation or a constraint. So we made it that. We made it a puzzle we need to solve, and every season we add on to our vocabulary of garments. And so if you look at the drawing of the pattern, you see all the different lines. This is the direction that it goes on the body, and then it all comes together magically into contemporary dresses. This is a way of really valuing each little piece. And it creates it actively creates a cleaner tomorrow. In my office, we now really have an ongoing challenge. Because the nice thing about this technique is I don't have to worry about the scraps accumulating in my office. I avoid making them. And I thought that was pretty smart. So every garment that we make, we think about what to do with the waste. And so for a big portion of our collection, we employ these kind of patterns where they are intricately designed to not create a problem. Now, if you look at this, you have the sleeves that are interloping into each other. You have the front and the back of the body that are connected. But you also see the little part over there, which is still waste. Now, one of the things with this technique is you can be really, really harsh for yourself and demand to get to zero, or you can be much kinder and accept that maybe 1% is a huge achievement coming from 15, which is the industry standard. So it's very rewarding as a journey, but at the same time, it does come with constraints. You need to accept that you might not get to zero, and you might also have troubles, for example, looking for a factory that is willing to do this. Because if you move the line with just a little bit, it might not fit back together. I don't know if you ever had a puzzle that was cut in a way, and then you try and it doesn't flow that easily. That's how it goes with this technique. If you move something, everything else moves as well. And then there's another thing, because we employ this for textile and for garments, we like to have our garments fit our body. So we have various sizes. Every size is a new puzzle. You can't just change the size of the garment without changing every line and how all of it comes together. But in doing so, for the last 5 years in my office, we have managed to save 485 meters of fabric. That is the height of the Shanghai Trade Center. So yes, we do all of these activities. We look at all these different patterns. We start interloping them in various ways because we think it's essential that we revalue and re-understand the magic of textile and of garment. And if I am standing here in front of you today, I would like to invite you to maybe think, if your garment cost you a horse and carriage, what would you do with it? How would you treat it? And maybe if we really, really value it that way, we can find ourselves in a better tomorrow where textile and garments are more expensive than gold. Thank you very much.